Now, he lost his job as party leader, so what did he do instead? Well, he got stuck into the benefits system. Ian Duncan Smith has made reforming the welfare state, a system that accounts for almost a third of total public spending, though that includes pensions, his life mission. In a moment, I'll be talking to the Work and Pension Secretary, but first, our reporter, Adam Fleming, went to the Job Centre to assess what progress has been made in almost 5 years in the job.
Ian Duncan Smith's been on a drive to revolutionise the welfare state for more than a decade. Today he's brought us to this job centre in West London, where around 800 people are trialling his centrepiece reform, universal credit.
Can I eavesdrop? Is that all right?
UC goes up and down as you work more or less hours and rolls 6 benefits, including tax credits, housing benefit and job seekers allowance, into one monthly payment.
Personally, for myself, the difference between JSA is back on JSA is had I found a one-off job, so working in a bar for one evening just to get a bit of extra cash in, I would have had to sign off job seekers allowance and then sign back on again every single time. Universal credit gave me the flexibility to, pick up odd shifts and to increase my hours bit by bit.
Music to his ears. Claimants also have to sign a contract saying what they'll do to find work, and job centre staff are being turned into life coaches.
The main thing that's different about doing this with universal credit is empowering the person that's sat in front of you. It's about making them take responsibility, and that's just brilliant. We need to bring the benefit system back to what it was there for, to help people, not to be a way of life.
Christmas bonus for Dawn. Time to meet some more people who've signed up. 1 million claimants were meant to be on universal credit. Now, just 40,000 actually are. And there have been big problems with the IT.
One of the issues, I think, with universal credit is that it comes as an all or nothing deal. You either get the entire package, which does all of these different things, some of which are quite controversial, or you get nothing. The system just doesn't work at all. If one part of it doesn't come through, then the whole system doesn't come through.
And it's just one of many big reforms. There are new caps on welfare, one on the total amount the government can spend each year, and another on the maximum a family can receive. Personal independence payments have been introduced for people with disabilities. The programme was branded a fiasco by the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee. Claimants of incapacity benefit were supposed to move to a new system, but there's a big backlog and the company doing it quit the contract. Then there are the changes to housing benefit, most controversially a reduction for claimants in social housing deemed to have an extra room, dubbed by critics the bedroom tax.
It simplifies the benefit system.
But all of this isn't just about bringing down the benefits bill, according to Christian Guy, who runs the Centre for Social Justice, the think tank set up by IDS.
They've had to find more than £20 billion worth of cuts on working age welfare, which is just enormous. And so those things are difficult. And I don't think he ever wanted to come in and do that, but he's had to.
And so actually his mission is what instead?
So he's come in and said, this system is important, but it's become what it shouldn't be, and that is a destination for people. And what the welfare system should be is a springboard back into work.
How you can save jobs and vacancies also.
And here's the last stop on Ian Duncan Smith's visit, a demo of the government's new jobs website, handy for someone who could lose their own job if the Tories fail to win the next election.
Yeah, you could be on that website in a few months' time.
I could easily be on, and I know that it will be a really helpful website. So
and it works.
I'll be glad, and I'll probably know how to work it too.
And Ian Duncan Smith joins us now for the Sunday interview. We'll be tweeting out the graphics we used during this interview. You can follow us on #BBCSP. And thank you for doing this interview. I know you've been struggling with your voice this weekend. Yeah, let's start with universal credit. It's your flagship welfare reform. The rollout has been delayed again and again. The OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, says now more delays are likely. What's your problem?
Well, there isn't a problem. In fact, the decision I took 2 years ago was the key. When I originally came in and we set up universal credit, the department wanted to roll it out in a particular way. I brought in some outside experts to look at this, and after a year I decided that actually this was not going to be the right way to roll it out. We needed to not do it in the old way where everybody just did the development and then pressed a button and out it went. That had huge risks to it. So what I wanted to do was to ensure that it actually rolled out in a more staged way. I brought in the key experts, people like Howard Shipley, who had set up the Olympic Park on time and on the budget, key IT people, and they looked at it and they said, what you need to do is phase this in. And that is exactly what we're doing. So from last year we started that phasing. Can I just finish? It's quite important, and I know you've got more to ask, but what we then said from last year onwards is that we would roll it out in the northwest, complete, and then we would start phasing and rolling it out through the rest of the country, and that's exactly what we announced the other day. We've nearly complete the northwest, and we will have 1 in 3 job centres will be on universal credit by the spring of next year.
Well, look at the figure. You say that, but 3 years ago, you said 1 million people would be on universal credit by April 2014 and 12 million by 2017. You didn't even manage 20,000 by April of this year, and the forecast is now for 7 million by 2019. It's a decade of massively missing targets.
Well, let's be clear about this. When we put that figure out, that was based on the original way they were going to roll it out. But to be quite frank with you, the biggest lesson I learnt in that early phase was that tax credits were rolled out in exactly the same way. On the day they launched, 400,000 people didn't get a payment. It struggled ever since, lost billions. So the reason why I reset that program 2 years ago was because I wanted to land it safely. And this is a complex program. And what we're finding as we rolled it to singles and couples and families in the Northwest, it's quite important this though, because I think people out there watching this will want to know the priority of the government is to get it safely in. And that's what's happened in the Northwest. The benefits for people on universal credit now in the Northwest are remarkable. People are seeking more work, they're taking work earlier, they're spending longer in work than they did under the job seekers allowance system, and businesses want people who are on universal credit.
Right, but
so that is the lesson we're learning by the way that I'm doing it now.
But even when you were resetting the program, as you were forced to do, you said in March 2013, everything is proceeding exactly according to plan. That just wasn't true.
Well, the point I was making was that the timescales that we believed at that stage were pretty much about right. What we've done is we've added a year and a half to the back end of the timescales. We will still have legacy benefits. That's the benefits that people would have been on, such as housing benefit and job seekers allowance and income support, closed down by the end of 2016 so that people will be claiming across the country universal credit. Then what you do is you bring in those who are on the existing benefits progressively over the next year and a half to 2 years.
But you're years behind schedule. You're now talking, by the way, about 7 million by 2019, not 12 million by 2017.
Well, hang on a second. No,
let me just finish my question.
No, you just give me a figure. It's very important, this. By the end of 2019, pretty much everybody who could and should be on it will be on it. So those numbers are exactly the numbers that we believe.
Why did you say 12 million by 2017?
I don't remember that figure, 12 million, but I do know this, that by the end of 2019...
3 years ago you said that.
Well, I didn't say it. In 2019, we will be dealing with the totality of the audience of people
who will be claiming it. It was an announcement by your department 3 years ago.
Well, look, I'm not arguing with you about that. I'm simply saying to you... No, I'm saying to you the number that will be eligible for universal credit will be this. Now remember, hold on a second, the numbers that have gone back to work and are now in work and would not be claiming benefit has fallen quite dramatically. So that affects the overall numbers that you're looking to put on. That's why those numbers are different.
But you've had to write off millions in IT costs. You may have to write off hundreds of millions in future. The Major Projects Authority had to put an amber-red warning light on the whole project. The Treasury still refuses to sign off the business case for universal credit.
No, not true.
Oh, well, it hasn't signed off the business case.
No, they've signed off the business case. The key point is...
No, they've signed off the early stage. They've not signed off the whole business case.
No, they have signed everything off to the end of the point that it's actually delivered. The MPA, hang on, the MPA this summer said categorically this was the right way to do it. They said that it was working according to plan and that they said this therefore was worth signing off to the Treasury. So the MPA has approved the plan of rollout. The Treasury has signed it off.
Secretary of State, the Treasury has not signed off the full business case for this project.
Yes, they have.
And because they've said, well, they said last week they would wait until the summer.
No. The summer's been and gone.
No, the summer of next year.
No, what we've got is complete sign-off on the case right the way up to 2019. Of course, at each stage, each set of monies that are relevant for the next bit of investment, of course, will always have to be run past the Treasury. And that's the way it works. But look, the key thing about universal credit is this. We have a plan that is now rolling out. It is rolling out according to that plan. People are benefiting from it. And by the way, your figures earlier on are not altogether correct. The fact is that we will have saved money. The rollout plan right now actually saves some hundreds of millions. It's now scheduled to cost 1.8 billion, not 2.4 billion. You referred to the IT. The IT actually, overall, will actually have a net asset of 130 million to the department and thus to the Exchequer. So the way it's rolling out, the reason why I'm saying this, because the decision I took to do this in a staged way will ultimately save money, but more importantly, and this is the #1 priority for me, this is about life change. This is about helping people in job centres stay with coaches even when they move into work to get more hours, and it benefits them. So, you know, the bottom third who are eligible for universal credit will benefit dramatically.
All right, well, let me ask you about that, because the purpose of universal credit is to make work pay. That's one of the fundamental reasons for it. But the Chancellor has now frozen the work allowance. That's the amount that people can earn before they start to lose benefits. He's frozen that for 4 years. Effectively, it's a real cut. That undermines the incentive to work.
Yeah, look, if circumstances were much easier and we didn't have an economy that had crashed in 2010, we could probably have been a little more generous. But the reality is that freeze that you're talking about in the OBR's report runs alongside a future Conservative government's decision to freeze tax credits. So all that will happen is that you will actually have no change to the differentials between the two, because one will have already been frozen, the other one comes into line with it. So the relative amount that they earn will be the same. It's simply bringing universal credit into line with tax credits.
If your party wins the next election, do you want to stay in this department and see the whole rollout? It's now going to be a 2-parliament rollout.
Yeah.
Have you sought assurances from Mr. Cameron that you'll stay to do it?
I'm not seeking any assurances. All I know is this.
It would be wrong for you to leave this job if you still had it while it's so incomplete.
Yeah, but my point is this programme that I reset and has got now, Andrew, will change lives dramatically. It is rolling out successfully. It's not my duty to say what job I will do or not do, or whether I'll have a job at all.
All right.
It's a privilege to do that. But all I would say to you is the decisions we took have been very different from decisions taken by past governments or whatever persuasion. We did not let this get to the point where it caused a problem. We have actually changed the plan. It is rolling out successfully. People in the Northwest are receiving it.
Okay,
lives
you've made
are
that
changing.
point.
Well, it's an important point.
I know, but you've made it.
Okay.
Let's move on to food banks. This week's cross-party report on hunger in Britain said that the single biggest reason for food bank referrals was your department's delay in paying benefits. Why can't you pay them more quickly?
Well, the truth is we are paying them more quickly, and this is the point that I think the report actually recognises, which is that when we came in, something like 88, 89% of benefits were paid on time. It's now closer to 96, 97%. Wow. Now, hold on. What they're saying is there is still some, for various reasons, and sometimes there are reasons why they can't complete a benefit payment because the documents haven't been correct. Maybe the sign-on didn't take place correctly. Maybe somebody didn't attend an interview. So sometimes there are good reasons why benefits not.
But even when the claim is approved, your department aims to start it within 16 days.
Yes.
It's during that 16 days people are forced to food banks.
Yes, but there was a reason for that, to make sure everything is right. But if somebody has a problem...
No, that's after the approval.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said. That's an approved policy
The report
position.
wants it done in 5 days. Why can't you do it in 5
I don't agree, because I think actually what happens is here that everybody who attends a job centre, who makes a claim, has a right, if they have a concern about their monies, to be able to ask for an advance payment. Now, and that can be granted to them. So in other words, if they have a difficulty financially, there is money available to tide them over any particular area or time that they have a problem with.
You don't agree with the report when it says there would be fewer people having to use food banks if your department paid the claims more quickly?
Well, if we could pay 100% more quickly, then I'm certain of that, yes.
So why not then?
Well, because we're working to, we've already got it up by 7%.
But do you accept, because your department previously has denied there was any link between the rise in food banks and the delay in your department paying benefits?
Because the reason why people go to food banks, there are lots of different reasons.
But this was one of the main
Some may be to do with some delays, which may have a reason. But my point about this, the reason why the department says that is because available to every single person in a job centre who is making a claim, if they say they have an issue or a problem, they can get an advanced payment. Now, what the report said, which I agreed with, was that we need to do much more to advertise that. So we're doing that now, and I accepted that. But what I do say is there are lots of other reasons. Lots of people go to food banks. The guy who runs the Oxford Food Bank said many people go because now they're more publicised.
Of course, I'm not saying that's the only reason.
So all I'm saying is that,
you know,
the point about the way we run the benefits is that we've got more people back to work, and people going back to work, therefore, are less likely to want to use food banks.
Except the use of food banks is rising rather fast.
Well, hold on, let me get this right. In Germany, food banks are used every week by 1.5 million people. It is tiny in proportion here. compared to a place like Germany,
they have more
which
food banks in Germany,
which has more generous benefits and which has a high level of pay. So just saying it's to do with benefits is quite wrong.
Well,
the reality,
as you know, that wasn't what I said. I said it was one of the reasons, not the only one. Let's look at another flagship reform, replacing the old disability living allowance with this new personal independence payment, PIP. The Public Accounts Committee says it's been, quote, nothing short of a fiasco. Now, when you look at this on top of all the delays on universal credit, this is a terrible track record.
Not really, because the universal credit separately was reset deliberately long before anybody decided to review it. I reviewed it internally. I wanted a different plan. With PIP, we've rolled it out in a phased way. The early phases did not go exactly according to plan, but what we did do is, by learning by what the problems were, we've actually improved that. All of those delays will be back on track by the end of this year.
Long and uncertain delays for people waiting to know if they're eligible, said the National Audit Office.
But not now. My point is, not everybody was rolled out to. We delayed the rollout so we could get those elements right.
Do you ever get anything right from the start?
Well, departments are big and they have lots of complex issues to do.
It seems that you're in a constant learning curve at DW.
Well, you are, because look,
you never get anything right from the start, and people suffer when you don't get it right.
Of course they do, Andrew, and my point about this is that's why we did it in a phased way. And the reality is that as we rolled out the personal independence plan, the truth is here, we're doing for the first time ever face-to-face health checks. Under the last system, disability living allowance, it was all done on paper. 70% of the people got lifetime awards. A tiny proportion ever saw anybody, and many people were written off. What we're doing now is instituting regular checks. Now, this means when you do that kind of thing, you're in an area which is very difficult to predict exactly how it will work.
Well, let's look at
far better that we get it right
carefully. Well, let's look at another
area
we
roll it out,
where you haven't seemed to get it right. An incapacity benefit, where you're assessing people on this benefit whether they're actually fit to work or not. Now, your department's own independent reviewer warned you that the process to assess this was not fit. It needed major changes, but you ignored that, and the upshot was 600,000 appeals against your department's decisions on fitness to work, 40% of which were upheld.
Look, we inherited this programme. It was launched by the last government. Let me hear about it. What we inherited at the time had some very strong forecasts about how it would work. I instituted 5 reviews of the programme. We have implemented every single element of the reviews over the last 3 years. ESA, Employment Support Allowance, is in need of reform. I've said that for some time.
But the 600,000 appeals, people don't know. People
the appeals now have fallen
have
dramatically.
Mental problems,
I know, exactly right.
They have severe disabilities, and they don't know. 40% of appeals against your department upheld. The system was not fit for purpose, and you have caused people serious anguish.
At the beginning, 40% of those who appealed were upheld. That is far less than 40% of all those who are using it. Something in the order of around 15% of all of the awards were overturned in appeal.
40% of 600,000 appeals is a lot of appeals.
No, wait, hold on a second. We instituted a mandatory reconsideration right in the middle of this. This is 2.5 years ago. And that meant now the appeals level has fallen to literally hardly any at all, because we institute an immediate review on a case, and the vast majority of those are upheld. If they want to appeal, they can, but very few people go on to appeal. So the appeals level has fallen. That is a reform that has worked. But the point about ESA is this. Employment Support Allowance is about changing a benefit that parked 1 million people for 10 years on a sickness benefit and nobody saw them. So the difficulty, and I think anyone listening to this needs to know, the difficulty when you do these health checks is that they are quite difficult sometimes to predict. So what we've actually done is we now have a much tighter management of those contracts. You'll see that the Maximus, the group that are coming in to perform on it, will actually perform much better, and the reforms we intend to bring through will tighten that process up. But, this is the first time anywhere in the world that anybody has instituted health checks for people who have claimed a sickness benefit.
Well, let's look at another area that seems to have been hampered by incompetence or just not getting it right. This bedroom tax, spare room subsidy, under occupancy charge, call it what you will. In January, your department was forced to admit that thousands of people had been wrongly charged because of errors in the way the regulations were drafted.
Actually, it would say small number proportionally to the whole lot, and it was because there was. I mean, if you ever looked,
not small for the people.
If you looked at the housing benefit regulations, Andrew, at some point they occupy 2 vast, great books like this.
But you've been in for 5 years now.
Yes, but no, the officials came back and said there was a small group of people who actually, they said, may not, because of a glitch in a previous piece, which actually Peter Lilly admitted had never been intended for something like this. Overall, the vast majority of this is working, that this is a reform that is quite reasonable, I think. The idea is to say to people who are, you know, after all, we've had a huge numbers of people waiting for houses in overcrowded accommodation, and what's happened is councils and housing associations have often housed people in large houses.
No, I know the case for it.
Well, I mean, I think people need to understand the purpose and principle of this is actually to make sure that we make greater use of our housing. And we gave local authorities over 350 million to ensure that people, if they have a problem for a year or if they need changes because they had changes to their house because they had disabilities, these can all be done locally. But the key point is this benefit is saving £1 million a day to taxpayers.
Right, but it's
£500 million a year,
right.
£1 billion
well, you
over
just
2
let me
years.
come on to
And those
because let's just have a look
correct.
at what's been happening to housing benefit. You've gone through this hugely controversial, unpopular reform. You've got some of the categorizations wrong. You say you've made a saving, and yet you look at what's happening to housing benefit there. It's going from 21 up to over 27 billion. It's still going through the roof. And can I put it to you that the reason why it's going through the roof, that there's been a 60% rise in the number of people claiming housing benefit, is because their wages are so low they can't afford their rent.
Okay, let's deal with that. When I walked through the door, the housing benefit bill was set to rise between £6 and £7 billion. Okay? What we have done is reduced that rise by £4 billion. Last year was the first year that housing benefit actually fell in real terms.
And then it starts to rise again.
Hang on, the first time it fell in real terms. Housing benefit under the last government doubled in cash terms. It went from something like 11 billion to near on 20 billion pounds in the space of 10 years. We inherited a housing benefit program that was out of control.
But it's still rising.
No, I didn't say it was going to fall. I said it was not rising anywhere near as fast. Why? Because the drivers of housing benefit are two things which have to be changed, which we're now doing. You need more houses. The last government got housing bills down to something like levels never seen since the 1920s.
Yeah.
So, you know, the answer is there are a lot of people looking for a smaller number of houses.
But there's been a 60% rise in housing benefit under this parliament.
Let me deal with this a second. This was going to rise by far, far faster had we not put these changes in. We changed local housing allowance. The truth is you can't turn this around overnight. As you know, this was out of control.
Or in 5 years.
No,
or
but
indeed,
I said at the time,
by the end of the decade,
no,
that
it's very easy. No,
I have to
tell you, housing benefit for the first time last year fell in real terms.
Yeah, but then it rises again.
Yeah, I know, but my point is we are getting control over it. But the big control, can I just finish one thing on housing benefit? The truth about housing benefit, you said about people in work claiming housing benefit. Let's deal with those figures.
Well, before you do, can I show you an example then? Because we have an example here about it, which may crystallise it for people. We've taken a family in your own constituency of Chingford. 2 children with 1 parent working only 24 hours a week on the London living wage, so not quite the lowest. Their earnings of 11,000 a year. They're topped up by the taxpayer by more than almost twice that, 20,000 a year. So they're on 11,000. They get a top up in benefits of 20,000, including housing benefit. Isn't that a huge taxpayer subsidy to businesses? It allows employers to continue paying low wages at our expense.
Yes, and here's the point. We've raised the minimum wage for the first time since before the recession above essentially earnings. So what we've actually got
But they're on the living wage.
Well, hang on a second.
It's higher.
Yeah, exactly right. It fell far too far. You know, over the last 8 years, prior to the last 2 years ago, but before that, 8 years before, you had the living wage, everyone talks about, the minimum wage had actually literally in real terms fallen. So what we've actually done for the first time is raise it. Of course I agree that people need to be earning more, but what we've actually seen now is that more people after a year in work are actually seeing their salaries rises by above inflation. 4% is the average.
Well, I think
now,
a lot of people...
Can I just finish? There was one point though on housing benefit, which is quite important, that you raised earlier, which is linked to this. You said that people in work are on housing benefit. There's more. Yes, but there are fewer now out of work on housing benefit. That number is falling.
I understand that.
Yeah, but it's important because it actually is a cheaper housing benefit bill.
They still need benefits.
If you pay them when they're in work than when they're out of work.
They still need benefits of twice their earnings in order to be able to live on. Now let's look at what would happen if, as you would encourage them, they went from working part-time to working full-time. If they did that, then they would earn an additional sum of just over 7,500 a year. But because of tax and benefit withdrawals, they get to keep less than £500. They get £7,500 more by working harder. They only end up with 500. A marginal tax rate of 94%. Why would you bother?
Universal credit is the answer to that.
Okay, well, let's look at universal credit. Let's just do that. Let's look at what would happen under universal credit. The family would be better off. It would keep $1,300 a year for those additional hours. They would still be paying an effective marginal rate of 83%. It drops from 94 to 83.
Wait a minute.
Why would you bother?
Hang on a second. That's once they move into the tax bracket. Below the tax bracket, they do not pay more than 65% on it. Right. And they only get to the tax bracket right up on the edge of full-time work.
Well, the moment they start paying basic income tax, they're on to a minimum marginal rate of 75%.
The family down at the bottom of the income scale actually earns a lot more proportionately, so the earnings are moved to them.
Secretary of State, your party thinks...
But hang on a second.
I need to put this point to you. Your party thinks that it's not worthwhile rich people working if they have a marginal rate of tax of 50%. Why should people on low salaries bother working for a marginal rate of 83%?
Because, you know, what we've inherited right now has marginal rates that are much, much higher than that. Of course we want to drive those marginal rates down. Universal credit is the way to drive it down.
I mean, if it's all right for rich people to pay a marginal rate of 45, why should poor people pay over 80?
But exactly why universal credit does that. It drives the marginal rate down for the poorest in work.
But it doesn't get it below 65.
Well, it can. It's up to governments to decide whether they want to lower that down.
So you've not been given enough money to get it down
65%
to 65.
is the line of withdrawal that the government, any government in future, can decide to either raise it or lower it. For the first time ever, you'll have a simple, clear idea of how much money you will have taken away from you as you enter work. But the key point about universal credit, it's not the taper rate. It's the in-work allowances. People are allowed to earn, if they are disabled or lone parents or whatever, far more money than they ever would have been done before that benefit is taken away from them. It's that bit, rather like a tax allowance, which changes the picture for families like this. Yes, the present system is complex, it's notchy, and it draws too much money away. But reforming and changing that is actually having a real effect, as you'll see in the Northwest.
Let's hear what some of your colleagues are saying, because it seems a lot in your party still have their eye on your welfare budget. This is what a lot said with the Chancellor after the autumn statement and reaction. Let's just get a mixture of what was being said.
Just to be fair.
I've said that difficult decisions are required, like freezing working age benefits. So I've been upfront about that. We're going to have to do things like freeze working age benefits. I'm not pretending these are easy decisions or that they have no impact.
We need to also make savings on benefits. If the figures that you're quoting assume no change in benefits, and we are very clear. We've said that we think that 12 billion from benefits is doable.
I'm just saying, of course, we've had to make difficult decisions on welfare, but ultimately, and we've got to go on having to make difficult decisions on welfare. If we don't make those decisions on welfare, we've got three alternatives. We can either borrow a lot more money, and that would put our country back into economic crisis, in my judgment, or we can massively increase taxes, or we can do those very, very big spending cuts on departments.
We need to find another £30 billion. We've said that we will find £12 billion from the welfare budget.
And we've said that we need to make savings from welfare.
My plans involve reductions in spending, including reductions in welfare.
Get the message.
Right. We've only got a few minutes left. Let me try and get some quick replies to these questions. Are pensioner benefits untouchable?
Well, what we've said is that we raise pensions for the very simple reason that they're the most vulnerable people in society. They can't affect their incomes.
So they are untouchable?
Well, you know, I think I take pride in the fact that pensions are now better off by £950 since 2010.
There's going to be another 12 billion of cuts in welfare spending. The 2-year freeze on working age benefits saves 3 billion. Can you tell us where the other 9 billion will come from?
I'm not here, honestly, today to set this out. It'll all be set out for the manifesto. But what I will say to you is, you know, our record of where we've come so far is that we'll have saved cumulatively by next year £50 billion from the welfare bill, 18 billion in year. The first year last year was the find that working age welfare fell.
Well, let me show you a chart of what's happened
to
welfare benefits, to welfare spending. Let's just get that up on the screen before we go, because what it shows, this is what's happened. This is what will happen in the course of this decade. It's gone from 206 billion to 240 billion. Now, if you look at all these changes, the paying of universal credit, of the housing benefit changes, disability and so on, yet it still continues to rise. Is it worth the candle?
Yeah, all right. Cash terms or GDP terms? In terms of GDP, welfare, working age welfare will have fallen to 2006 levels by next year. That is a saving on working age welfare of 50 billion cumulatively, Andrew. And
Still
that is
rising.
Hang on, that is the first time ever anybody has got the welfare budget to fall in real terms.
It doesn't look to me that.
No, no,
actually, in real terms, it only goes down by 2 billion over the whole decade.
Now, hold on a second.
By 2 billion.
Last year was the first time in 16 years that the working age welfare budget fell, Andrew. We'll have saved cumulatively from the original forecast in 2010, when the last government left us, £50 billion cumulatively by the end of this year. Yes, and on top of that, we spent more on pensioners.
All right.
That's why the
I've got
overall
one
welfare
final
bill
question for you.
costs more than they originally
Would you
thought.
like the next Tory manifesto to limit child benefit to the first 2 kids?
I've already made my position clear about this in various articles. The Prime Minister's already spoken about it.
It
is one of the proposals that I think was well worth looking at.
You would like it to be in the manifesto?
Well, I think it's well worth looking at, and it's something that if we decide to do it, we'll announce out. But it does save significant money, and also it helps behavioural change.
All right. Ian Duncan Smith, thank you, and congratulations on the voice holding out.
Thank you. I'm laryngitis, I'm sorry.